So welcome to Talk Wrestling with Jimmy and Frank. We're talking about greatest wrestling feuds in wrestling history. And if you viewed part one, I discussed my criteria for what I will narrow down to the greatest wrestling feuds, and eventually, my opinion, what the greatest wrestling feud of all time was. So I touched in part one briefly. I touched upon some memorable feuds. I also distinguish between what I think is a feud and a rivalry. And in part one, I like I said, I listed all my criteria for what involves a great feud. So I left off talking about Cena and Orton, how I thought it wasn't really a great feud, but more of a great rivalry. And we'll pick up now. I really stood in the 80s, so now I'll move more into the 90s and then into the 2000s and present. In the 90s, we had, I think, on paper, this really had all the earmarks of a great feud, because not only was it a feud, but it became a rivalry between The Undertaker and his, when they introduced his brother Kane. And if you remember that, when Kane appeared, who could forget Jim Ross screaming, "It's got to be Kane! That's got to be Kane! That's got to be Kane!" And when Kane came out for the first time with Paul Bearer, he looked awesome. He looked sick. I mean, he was so muscular and so huge. I mean, for the first time in a while, you actually thought it appeared on screen that the Undertaker had his work cut out for him. And who could forget the face the Undertaker made when he finally was confronted by Kane? And for that moment, you actually thought, wow, like, Kane is really, he looks bigger and stronger and more evil than the Undertaker. And it got personal. Paul Bearer betrayed the Undertaker. They had such a great storyline. How it was supposedly the Undertaker who burned the house down, I believe, and Kane got burned. And the only reason why I won't consider this in the greatest feuds is because, oh man, it just, I think it lacked. I mean, not taking anything away from these guys, I just think that overall the chemistry wasn't there, and it didn't sustain the feud and the in ring over the course of time. On paper, yeah, I mean, the storyline was great. You could write they did. They made a comic out of the Undertaker and Kane. I mean, the story is it's great. You could make a horror movie out of it. It's the Undertaker's little brother Kane. Of course, some of you might know Kane was supposed to be the Undertaker's name originally, but when he debuted, Vince wanted to name him Kane. But this feud had a lot of good things. We saw buried alive matches. We saw the Inferno match where the ring was surrounded by fire and flames. It got personal. Paul Bearer betrayed. It lasted a while, but much like the Cena and Orton, I think it got overdone. And then they teamed up. They became the Brothers of Destruction. So good, but not in consideration for me personally. And everything I'm saying is my opinion. I don't claim to be an expert or a guru of wrestling history. It's my opinion. I'm just a lifelong fan. I know I was busting myself. I don't look as old as I do, but I've been watching for a long time. No, that doesn't make me an expert, but it's knowledge. I have watched and I kind of could figure things out. When I watch other people who have wrestling shows or wrestling discussions, I mean, I pretty much know and I'm thinking what they're saying. I mean, that doesn't make me special. Just it comes when you watch wrestling for 35 years, you'll understand. So anyway, moving on. I'm sorry for that little uh, going off topic. Uh, another very good feud was in WCW. I mean, something finally captivated the audience away from the NWO angle was Diamond Dallas Page and Randy Macho Man Savage. This this feud made catapulted DDP to main event status, without a doubt. It was really a hot feud. Uh, you had Page with his wife Kimberly going up against Savage, who had joined the NWO and was in tandem again with Miss Elizabeth, his ex-wife now. And Elizabeth was also NWO, and you saw for the first time uh, Elizabeth. We all remember her being the goody two shoes. Now she was she was into it. She was a heel. She was hailing it up, man, and it was great. You never this is what we want to see. We want to see things that are different. At that moment in time, that was different. We saw Miss Elizabeth being a heel manager. That's what WWE has dropped the ball on today. Anyway, but this was great. It was intense. Uh, Savage ambushing Page with Elizabeth, taking him out, and the matches were hot. They were definitely stole the show. They stole the show, and this match catapulted DDP thanks to Savage, who put Page over. He insisted on putting him over. That's what Page claims, and but didn't last too long enough for my criteria. But memorable. Whew. And how about the match that the feud? You want to talk about a feud that happened in? All right, we'll keep it in the '90s, which many might consider the greatest feud. It was very entertaining to say the least, but it will not fit my criteria because I remember I said I wanted two individual performers going up against each other, and it has to be in the ring. The feud has to culminate in the ring, and I'm talking about Stone Cold versus Mr. McMahon. I mean, this storyline was great. One of the greatest storylines of all time. Wow. I mean, you had Mr. McMahon coming out after the Survivor Series Montreal Screwjob. He became the top heel in the company for all those years. We saw Vince as the commentator. People didn't even know he was the owner. The fans, and he was like the goofy announcer. But now he morphed into the owner and the evil controller, the manipulator. And you had Austin was the people's. He was a regular Joe who didn't take no crap, and he would not conform. And it lasted a long time and back and forth. But again, it never had. I mean, they did have a match, but you know what I mean is I wanted matches between the two performers themselves. But one of the greatest storylines. If me and Jimmy ever decide to make an episode for greatest storylines, that could be in the top three. How about a feud where I was talking about going personal was Edge and Hardy. That was really, I know I mentioned it in part one, and that feud catapulted Edge into stardom, much like the DDP Savage feud to catapult the DDP into main event status. But now I'm gonna go into the more current for you, all you youngins out there. How about the Wyatts versus the Shield? Would you consider that a feud or a rivalry? You had the Shield cut a debut in WWE. They took over. They were must watch. Three studs, man. Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, Roman Reigns. When he was cool, he was the enforcer of the group. I mean, they were kicking ass. You didn't know where they were coming from, whose side they were on. And after they got established, then the Wyatts debuted. And I know if you think back to when the Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family debuted to now, I mean, oh man, they really dropped the ball on them. I mean, the Bray Wyatt's been reduced. He was reduced just to cutting long, scary promos and at times rambling on, never wrestling. I mean, and it's but I mean, if you go back and you watch those matches between the Shield and the Wyatts, those six-man tags. Oh, let me tell you, some of the I think I can't remember offhand which pay-per-view, but they had a match of the year candidate. So I don't know. I said I want to limit this category for this episode to individuals, one-on-one, and not tag teams. But that was a good feud, and you could count it as a rivalry. I think my candidates for greatest feuds, like I said, will be rivalry and feuds together. That's going to be a criteria. Speaking about the Shield, how about Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins? Man, when those two get in the ring, it's magic. They just have great matches. And unfortunately, because WWE's in the PG era, I think they could have really did more. You had Seth Rollins curb stomp Ambrose's head into the cinder block, which is really that. I mean, for today, in the PG era, that was pretty dastardly. I thought the Hell in a Cell was really, really good. I mean, without any color, or I mean bleeding, that match was still pulled off in the Hell in a Cell. You know, I thought maybe they could have upped the ante. I mean, if there's a time to do it in a Hell in a Cell in a feud between two guys who don't like each other. I mean, you had Seth Rollins betraying the Shield brothers, joining the Authority. I mean, this had it all. And I'll say it's one of the greatest feuds of recent times, but not of all time. Definitely of the 2010s. Definitely gets it. So now now that I've, before I move on to my candidates, I hope you guys don't go too crazy, or if I didn't miss anything. But these are I narrowed it down to these. And first, let's start with I'm going to start with going in the late 90s in WCW. Probably I mean, everybody says the NWO was responsible for WCW beating WWE in the ratings. But what made the NWO angle even compelling and must-watch TV was Sting. When Sting was accused by the WCW wrestlers of maybe being aligned with the NWO, Sting got mad and upset, and he disappeared. And then he got he rebranded himself as the Crow Sting with the white makeup. I mean, that was so great. Every week, where would Sting be, and was he in the building? And you'd see him up in the rafters, and he'd point the bat at Hogan, and You didn't know whose side he was on. Uh, what a build up. First started, he never talked. You didn't know whose side he was on. Was he on the NWO side? Was he secretly working for them? Was he on WCW side? Probably he was on nobody's side. He was on his side. He was the lone wolf. And wow, what you had two icons of two wrestling legends who were on a collision course and one of the hottest angles of all time, and and, uh, and they faced each other at Starrcade '97. Uh, this is why I won't call this the greatest feud of all time, because the in-ring work, even though that Starrcade '97 was the highest grossing pay-per-view for WCW in history, that was like oh man, you had to, everybody who was a wrestling fan watched that. I think they only had 700,000 buys. Well, not only 700,000 buys, but I'm telling you, there was millions watched that, and that was good. But I don't know. Supposedly Hogan didn't want to do business. He didn't want to do the clean job, and Bret Hart, who had recently signed with WCW and was fresh off the Montreal screw job in '87, he came in at the end, and he claimed that Nick Patrick did a fast count, and he's not going to let that happen again. He doesn't want anybody to see anybody get screwed again. So he restarts the match, and then Sting puts Hogan in the Scorpion Deathlock, and Hart rings the bell. I don't know. I don't like the way that the wrestling work, the in-the-ring work, wasn't as good as it should have been. So that disqualifies it as the greatest wrestling feud of all time. But it would have been so if the wrestling was better. So next, this was it came out of nowhere, and it actually was spanned over 5 years, and it continued. It was 2003, and then reignited in 2008. And I'm talking about Y2J, Chris Jericho, and the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, and Chris Jericho was still he just came from WCW. He was still trying to make a name for himself in the WWE. And when HBA came back from retirement in 2002, Chris Jericho was, he loved Shawn Michaels. That was his idol probably. But in 2003, in January 2003, Jericho said he was not only the next Shawn Michaels, but he was going to be better than Shawn Michaels. And it started at the Royal Rumble, and on Raw, Jericho won a stipulation match where he got to pick his own entry at number 2, and neither of them won the Royal Rumble. But I mean, wow, this had it all. The in-ring work, the matches between these two guys were great. They had a ladder match at WrestleMania 19, I believe. No, they wrestled for the title at the day. I'm not sure. I think they wrestled for the title at WrestleMania 19, and I think Michaels won that. And some say that stole the show. The Hogan and Vince McMahon, who we said might have been the greatest feud candidate, was the main event that night. And then we had, I remember at the end of the match, after 20, I think it was 20 or a half hour, HBK put out his hand to Jericho, and Jericho looked at him, and he didn't just shake his hand; he hugged him, but then he kicked him in the groin, and then dropped him, and that would really catapult the feud into the stratosphere. In 2008, it reignites. And this is when Jericho came back from a hiatus, and he changed his character into the suit-wearing character who didn't speak. If you remember when he first came back, he didn't say a word. He would come in and never talk. And Jericho says that was a character. He got that from the character from No Country for Old Men. He tried to imitate the character Anton Sugar from that movie, who was a really great villain. And he never spoke, and he was really, and he would just look with a suit, and now he had short hair, and of course we all remember the Jericho-Tron 6000, HBK getting a taste of his own medicine, where Jericho accused Michaels of being a lying, deceitful bastard, and his fans were blind sheep. And Jericho puts Michaels' face through the Jericho Titantron on the TV screen. And man, that was a payback for Michaels putting Jannetty through the barbershop window. And then, of course, just when you thought it couldn't get worse, Shawn Michaels and his wife are on the highlight reel. And before you know it, Jericho inadvertently punches Michael's wife in the face and knocks her out. And you didn't know if that was real or not, or if he punched it too hard. And even Jericho was breaking character, and he looked scared, and we didn't know. But you knew that the match that they would have after that was going to be a war, and Michaels was going to skin Jericho. Wow. What could you say about that? I think that's definitely one of my considerations for one of the greatest feuds. It got personal. It dastardly deeds. It continued over a long period of time. But it's one of my candidates. And how about this? Might surprise you, but even though it's not doesn't fit my criteria because it's not necessarily individual, I'm going to mention the Authority, Triple H, and Stephanie McMahon versus Daniel Bryan. How that was a feud. I mean, you had the Evil Authority versus the Ultimate Babyface Daniel Bryan. It spilled into the mainstream. You had the Yes chant being done at arenas all across the country. It culminated in a long time. Who could forget the SummerSlam swerve when Daniel Bryan finally got his moment, got the clean win over John Cena, and then fireworks and confetti and streamers are coming down. Everybody's going crazy. And then Randy Orton comes out with his Money in the Bank briefcase. Is he gonna cash in? Yes, no, is he teasing? You're like, they're just teasing it. Next thing you know, Triple H spins Daniel Bryan around, kicks him, and gives him the pedigree. Orton cashes in 1, 2, 3, and he would go on. This would go on till WrestleMania 31. You didn't know. Fans didn't know if the suppression of the Yes movement of Daniel Bryan was real or not. Was it going to work? Daniel Bryan said in his book that Vince McMahon was the guy who actually created the Yes chant. It was his idea. But if Daniel Bryan was so popular and so universally over, how come they did everything in their power, or at least on screen, to suppress him? And he was supposed to battle. He was supposed to work against Sheamus in WrestleMania 31. It's gonna be like the sixth to last match, but the fans prevailed, and that ended with one of the greatest WrestleMania moments, in my opinion. You had 70,000 people doing the yes chant, and the feud ended. And of course, we know how unsadly Daniel Bryan got injured right after that, and he never really got a full schedule and had to retire. But that again, another feud, great feud, but only because it wasn't an individual against an individual. My next candidate for greatest feud of all time will be, sure, here we go, Shawn Michaels again versus Bret Hart. And you want to talk about the lines being blurred. I mean, I consider this one of the greatest feuds because it started off as a rivalry between Bret Hart and HBK, and then it got personal and became a feud. And to this day, people, you say Bret Hart and HBK didn't get along, how they had fights in the back. The stories of Bret Hart ripped at Shawn Michaels' hair in a fight. They both didn't want a job to each other. The in-ring work, spectacular. Iron Man matches, ladder matches. I don't know if they had a ladder match. I think Bret Hart wants to, but it never happened. And then it got personal. All the digs. When Shawn Michaels formed the X, and then became DX versus the Hart Foundation, and we all know how the feud ended in Montreal. The screw job. It froze the wrestling world. It was the talk of the wrestling world. Bret Hart, showed up on WCW 7 days later, and they blew that. Of course, they don't want to do anything with Bret Hart except to just take him away from WWF. But definitely a consideration for the greatest feud of all time. So far, I haven't put anything in order. I said HBK, Shawn Michaels and Jericho, and Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. But I think, my opinion, and I'll say my opinion, the greatest feud of all time, I'd have to say, is Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. And if you think about it, it covers all the criteria. Who could forget the memorable Piper's Pit? Leading up to it, they gave Andre the memorial trophy. It was big, and then Hogan got a bigger trophy, and Andre walked out without saying a word. It was like, whoa, what was he mad? Did he get upset? Andre, did he just get upset and walk away from Hogan? And then the following week, Piper brings out Hogan. The Body's going to bring out Andre. And lo and behold, who walks in with Andre but Bobby Heenan? And I remember as a kid, my heart was pounding. I was like, whoa, what's going on? And what a great job of Heenan putting Andre over as a heel. And all Andre had to do was just stand there, and look stoic, no expression. And he looked scary. This is no longer the friendly giant who smiled, and he burned a hole through Hogan's eyes, and Hogan didn't know what to say, do, much like the fans at home who didn't know what was to make of it. And of course, that memorable moment, and this is when I talk about memorable, and where were you at the time when Andre grabbed Hogan's shirt and shook him and ripped his crucifix off, ripped the shirt off. And the scene ends with Hogan kneeling on the ground. And Piper tells him, "You're bleeding. Hey, man, you're bleeding." But from then, would Hogan accept Andre the Giant's challenge for WrestleMania? And he comes out on another Piper's Pit And if you Google it, that's another funny moment. Piper asks him, will you or will you not accept Andre the Giant's challenge? And Hogan screams, yes! That was funny. But, and of course, WrestleMania 3, mainstream, I'm talking about at the time, before this year's 2016 attendance record for WrestleMania. I'm sure if AT&T Stadium, Cowboy Stadium, whatever it's called, would have been around back for WrestleMania 3, they would have broke the indoor attendance record. That match had drawing power. Not only was it a feud, now it became a rivalry. You had, without a doubt, the number 1 and 2 most recognizable wrestlers in the world. I mean, think about it. Everybody, if you went up to everybody at the time and today, and you ask them who Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan are, they'll say they're wrestlers. And of course, maybe their match wasn't so technically sound, but they told a great story. And that iconic moment that will live forever is Hogan slamming Andre. I mean, and then when you thought it was over, they had a rematch on Saturday Night's Main Event, and that main event drew in 33 million people. I guess the ratings counted back then when there was no internet, right? Please give me a break. Put something interesting on and people will watch on TV and anywhere, okay? I'm not going to go into a diatribe, but and you had the rematch. Would Andre do it this time? Would he take the belt from Hogan? Now he's managed by Ted DiBiase, and all hell breaks loose. And you had Hebner in the ring, and who comes out next? A referee who looked like we had 2 identical refs. And at the time, before we knew that there was the Hebner brothers, you were like, what the hell? Like, they were twin brothers. They looked identical, and the storyline was that Ted DiBiase paid some referee to get plastic surgery to look like Hebner, and he screwed him out of the championship. Andre won the belt the first time, and I think, what was it, 5 years that Hogan had been pinned. He lost the belt. This was a shock. My God, Hogan actually lost the title. He got screwed by Andre, and then Andre, after winning the belt, gives to Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase paid Andre for the belt, and the WWF president Jack Tunney said it was invalid, and they would have a tournament for the match. But that's my pick for the greatest wrestling feud of all time. Hogan and Andre. Even if you go back to the before Hogan actually became Hulkamania, 1980, Hogan and Andre had a big match at Shea Stadium. So definitely rivals and feud. It was a rivalry and a feud all together. It had all the criteria, and my opinion, the greatest wrestling feud of all time, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. So if you agree, you agree. If you don't, you don't. That's the end of part 2. And thank you if you bother watching. I'll talk to you later.